viewers, welcome to another edition of Essential Inspirational Highlights. On this evening, I will continue with the healing series, lesson 3. The scripture lesson text for this evening will be in Luke, the 5th chapter, verses 17 through 26. It states, beginning at the 17th verse. And it came to pass on a certain day, as he was teaching, that there were Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by, which were come out of every town of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was present to heal them. The 18th verse. And behold, men brought in a bed, a man which was taken with a palsy, and they sought means to bring him in and to lay him before him. The 19th verse. And when they could not find by what way they might bring him in because of the multitude, they went upon the housetop and let him down through the tiling with his couch into the midst before Jesus. In verses 20 through 23. And when he saw their faith, he said unto him, Man, thy sins are forgiven thee. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this which speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? But when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answering said unto them, What reason ye in your hearts? 23. Whether it is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Rise up and walk. And verses 24 and 26. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power upon earth to forgive sins, he said unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, arise and take up thy couch and go into thine house. And immediately he rose up before them and took up that whereon he lay, and departed to his own house, glorifying God. And the 26th verse, and they were all amazed, and they glorified God, and were filled with fear, saying, We have seen strange things today. And the topic for this evening is where there's a will, there's a way. Let me repeat that topic again. Where there's a will, there's a way. And this is part of the healing series. In this lesson, Jesus Christ was a Capernaum, teaching inside of a house. By this time, his fame has spread throughout many cities. There was a massive crowd of people inside and outside the house. Among the people sitting in the crowd were the Pharisees and the scribes. They were the Jewish leaders on the time of Jesus. And let me give you this little information about the scribes and the Pharisees. The scribes were educated men who were the experts of the Old Testament law. They were faithful in studying the scriptures. Some of their duties included teaching the law, interpreting the scriptures, preserving and copying scriptures on parchment scrolls, drafting legal documents, and writing commentaries of the law. The scribes also added many man-made traditions to what God had said. And many of the scribes were Pharisees too. So who were the Pharisees? The Pharisees were a strict religious sect of Jews who spent much of their time teaching in the synagogues. They were highly educated and were leaders in the community. The Pharisees had a substantial, meaning weighty, influence over the political and religious standards. They considered themselves righteous and looked down on others. They followed and respected the tradition of their elders. Both the scribes and the Pharisees heard about Jesus and the countless miracles that he performed. Rather than coming with an open heart to receive a blessing, these religious leaders and teachers came to find fault with Jesus. To say it bluntly, these were Jesus' enemies. Also, there were 4 men that came carrying a paralyzed man on a cot. They could not get past the crowd at the door. Now, listeners, you would think they would have just turned around and said, well, we tried, buddy. Let's go home. And maybe Jesus will come back some other time. Or better yet, just one look at that crowd, look at that big crowd of people, would have been enough to go back home. Now, listeners, what's this man? He did not have just one friend. He had 4. That's the testimony right there. It's not noted in the scripture how far these 4 men had to walk or where they were from. The fact is that they were concerned about getting help for their paralyzed friend. So they remembered why they started. And this took some teamwork on their behalf. These 4 men had to take off from their jobs to help this poor soul. Can you imagine, my listeners, having to carry a cot for a long period of time? They did not even complain or make excuses. Their main goal was to get help for their friend. These 4 men had enough faith to believe that Jesus could heal their friend. Like others, they heard about the miracles of so many people being healed. These 4 men were true friends. The man in the lesson was paralyzed. He was helpless and was dependent on others to help him. He had to be carried around. These 4 men were compassionate and put the man's needs above their own. They gave him 100% support. There was no turning back. Listeners, these four men were determined to help the paralyzed man. And they had the attitude, yes, we can. They had to figure it out. So rather than looking at the circumstances and complaining about the problem, let me repeat that again. Rather the circumstances and complaining about the problem, they chose to brainstorm and think of some alternatives together as a team. Where there's a will, there's a way. These four men had to think outside the box. What does this mean? It means that the four men had to come up with a creative way to get the paralyzed man past the crowd. So as you can see, their creativity was flowing here. They had the paralyzed man's interest at heart. So they were turning their ideas into a reality. These four men used any means necessary to get help for the paralyzed man. They went beyond the call of duty and went out of their way to help the paralyzed man. My listeners, that is a true mark of a true friend. The poor man's condition and their faith in Jesus Christ moved the man. I should say, moved the four men, not just one man, it moved all four men to action. They were not taking no for an answer. These four men were committed in getting their friend help. So, what did they do? Thank you for asking, my listeners. Well, we know that they could not enter the front door because of the crowd. My listeners, in Bible days, a stone. The roofs were flat and made of mud mixed with straw. There are stairways outside that led to the roof. These men used the stairway to carry the paralyzed man to the roof. Once they reached the roof, they made a hole through the roof to lower the man down to Jesus. My listeners, that was a whole lot of work. They had to pluck out some of the roofing to make the hole big enough to lower their friend down. Listeners, they risked their lives. They could have slipped and fell through the hole while trying to lower their friend. Also, they made a hole in someone erupted while they were plucking out the roofing material. They were bold in making a hole in someone else's roof. Of course, it was for a worthy cause. That's a whole lot of faith, my listeners. Jesus was very impressed with the faith of the four men. They took extraordinary measures to get their friend healed by Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith on all these four men, he told the paralyzed man that his sins were forgiven. This response was unusual from the previous healings that Jesus performed. He would normally say, "You're a healed," or "Your faith has made you whole," etc. Now, listeners, as the Son of God, Jesus Christ has the authority to forgive sins and heal the sick. This is an opportunity for everyone present to see that Jesus could forgive sin and heal the sick. So, what was their reaction of those Pharisees and scribes? The Pharisees and the scribes said to themselves, "Who does this man think he is? He is speaking blasphemies by telling this paralyzed man that his sins were forgiven. Only God can forgive sins." Our listeners, the Jewish leaders, again with the scribes and the Pharisees in this lesson, did not recognize that Jesus was the Son of God. They did not believe in Jesus and sought any way to discredit him for all the good that he had done. The Jewish leaders were very jealous and envious of him because of his popularity. Jesus took away their spotlight. Our listeners, Jesus Christ knew what the Jewish leaders were thinking, and he rebuked them for their evil thoughts in their hearts. Jesus Christ let the Pharisees and the scribes know not only did he have the power to heal, he also had the power to forgive sin. He asked if it was easier to say, "Thy sins be forgiven thee," or to say, "Rise up and walk." So to prove that he had the power to forgive sins, he told the paralytic man to rise up, take his cot, and go home. Well, my listeners, the man immediately got up and began glorifying God and went home. I was amazed. Again, everyone had the opportunity to witness Jesus forgiving the man's sins, for forgiving the man's sin and healing him as well. So, what can we learn from this lesson? Well, don't limit Jesus Christ to just being a healer. He can also forgive you of all of your sins. As the Son of God, God has given Jesus Christ the authority to heal the sick and to forgive sins. A true friend. A true friend will stick with you through thick and thin. This means that when you are going through tough times, a true friend will be there for you and encourage you. And if I'm looking at this photo, A true friend will go the extra mile to help you. Think about those 4 friends who walked, we don't know how many miles they walked to help him, to get help. They would go beyond expectations. They went the extra mile and they pressed forward and didn't look back. Nothing can stop them. And they worked as a team. Teamwork here. And a genuine friend, again, like I said, they are there for you. They will encourage you, and they have your best interest at heart and will look out for you. This person will go the extra mile and help lift your burdens. A true friend will be compelled to help you, not talk about you or sit back and do nothing. Action speaks louder than words. Talk is cheap. A busybody is not a friend. That's an enemy. My listeners, you have to keep the faith. Don't let any obstacle deter your faith. Be determined and don't give up. Be a risk taker, like the 4 men in the lesson. Be a risk taker. Outside to give you some creativity. And this lesson also, we can learn to have faith, hope, and love. Love for one another. When you see your brother or your sister hurting, needs help. And God will guide you with some non-traditional ways to solve a problem. So again, think outside the box. Don't be afraid to try something new. And remember, my listeners, when there's a will, there's a way. Listeners, for tuning in to Essential Inspirational Highlights. I am your host, Sister Janie. I will be back in 2 weeks on Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Have a good evening.